We've been training for a long time, and we are constantly learning. We learn every year. We're constantly learning new things. But if you could go back and tell your younger self something, give yourself some advice earlier in your athletic career, what's the first thing that you would think of?
I have a lot of things that I would tell myself, my younger self. I feel like it's been a constant journey, and I love that about it. And I think that's what makes it really rewarding. But I think one thing or two things that really stick out to me are, the first thing is like, you don't necessarily have to train like a pro. To be strong and fit, you just have to consistently show up. And I think that, yes, I did compete as a pro in CrossFit. So at that point I did need to be training as a pro, but that was only one snippet of my life. And I think that just kind of looking back and then coming out of it and just understanding that in the end, consistency is really what's going to move the needle, and showing up for yourself every single day is just the most important piece. And you don't need to spend 6 hours in the gym. And I think that that is something that I just always felt like I needed to do more, whatever it was. Like if I was getting up before I was going to my auditing, I would, slowly get up earlier and earlier. And then I'd feel like I'd come home and need to do more. And it's just, I don't know why I had this more is necessary mindset.
I think that's really common, especially for the younger lifters. And I think most people could take a lot away from that, where the more you learn, kind of the older you get a little bit, the more you realize that quality and intention matters more than just more. And I think some of that comes down to just a little bit of maybe lack of understanding. So the default is just more. Like maybe I don't know exactly what I should be doing. Maybe I don't know exactly what my progression is going to be. So the default is just, I'll do another gym session, or I'll do another lift or another interval. And I think that it could go a very long way that people would end up feeling better and seeing more results, understanding that a structured program that they're able to stick to consistently for a longer period of time gets them drastically further than just constantly adding more, feeling like they're being more productive.
I would definitely agree, but I think that's definitely something that's easier said than done. I think that I fell more victim to this than you. Would you? Do you ever feel like you just wanted to add more in?
Yeah, for sure. And I think depending on maybe your age and the time of life that you're at, it can be fun to just do more. And if you've got a group of friends at the gym, or when you're just getting maybe into working out or fitness, when you start seeing some results and you start seeing like creating some momentum, it becomes rewarding. And the default is like, to do just do more basically. And I think you can get away with that for a while. And it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think it can kind of create some bad habits that down the road don't end up being productive.
Yeah, I would say those bad habits definitely can be detrimental. And it can be like the junk volume thing. I think that for me, it just became junk volume. And it's like, well, I did this last week, so I need to do this week, or I need to fill that space. And that was sometimes just me just adding. And like I said, that if you are training for something, maybe like the CrossFit Games, or which most people are not, maybe there's a time and a place like you mentioned. But yeah, that chapter of life, I think that is the first one that comes to mind for me. So what would be the first one that comes to mind for you if you wanted to tell your younger self something about fitness?
Honestly, I think I just wish I would have started earlier. I've kind of talked about this before, but I started with the more like extreme sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, not extreme, but I was on the golf team. And I think looking back, it would have been so beneficial to those things to have started in the gym earlier. And there's also just a learning curve. And the earlier you can start, the more of a head start that you are going to have, and the longer that you can continue to make progress. And a positive that I think has come from social media is that has penetrated the younger generation so much more now. And you'll see golfers, you'll see skateboarders, snowboarders that take their sport seriously, and then they make it very intentional that they also spend time in the gym because they know that it benefits their sport. It gives them an edge up. And when I was getting out of high school, or when I was in high school, that just wasn't the case. Like nobody really did that. Whether it was golf, snowboarding, you just did the sport that you participated in. And if it wasn't necessarily gym related or sport specific, training wasn't really integrated.
I think that's a really interesting topic in conversation right now. Sports, like you mentioned, like being in the gym is going to make you better at sports. it's been fascinating for me. And I'm sure a lot of you guys listening, some of you might have kids and you might be going through this right now. We had a lot of parents that wanted their kids to start in the gym early, like very young, 7, 8. And we had, kids classes for that. But I don't know, I played a lot of sports. I know you did a little bit, we've talked about this in prior podcasts, but you did a little bit more extreme style. I want to say more outdoor stuff, where I did more of the traditional sport route. Something that I was thinking about the other day, I didn't specialize. I didn't specialize until I was a senior in high school. And I think that actually was a huge benefit for me. So I was getting to do dryland and training in all different ways, and I got to develop and be on these teams. But I didn't specialize in that sport. And so I got to kind of experience lots of different styles of training. And I think that kind of is an important piece. And I think that a lot of people are, having their kids want to specialize at the age of 7 or 8. And I think being in sport is good, but I think that specialization right now, when I talk to my sister and talking about her kids, I think it's happening too early. I think kids are missing out on getting to experience all these different styles of training.
It's interesting because I also think there's a really big difference between guys and girls. And we've seen this in the gym. We've coached a ton of younger athletes, and the approach that they both have is pretty different. And I think that guys tend to prioritize either complexity or weights more so than quality of movement. And it's a really hard thing because especially when you're getting stronger and you're maybe starting to be able to lift a little bit more weight, you want to be able to just lift more weight. And I remember when I first started at the gym and I was lifting with guys, that was definitely my priority as well. And I didn't come from the sports background, so quality of movement, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So it was more fun to lift more weight than spend the time learning proper technique. And that is something that I came around to fairly quickly, but we do see very often that guys want to lift heavy, and a lot of times they're not as aware of their body, and especially those teenage years where they aren't in great positions, but they're able to move the weight, but it's going to end up causing them either problems. They're going to have to relearn how to move better down the road, and whether it's teenagers or adults coming into the gym, that's always something we had such a huge priority for, was learn it right from the beginning so that you don't get 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the road and then have to relearn or take 2 steps back because you prioritize the weights and now you got to kind of relearn how to move well. And it's definitely hard when you're younger, but the more you can do that, the less injury prone you're going to be, the further your progress is going to go. And, I think that the best movers in most sports are the ones that have the longest, careers. And not that you have to have a career to be in the gym or athletics, but it's the people that last the longest and don't have the aches and pains and injuries down the road.
Yeah, so I think getting started earlier is a great piece of advice. I think a lot of us would tell our younger selves that. And for me, I did start in sports younger, but I think for me, I wish I would have found weights, like specific weight training, a little bit earlier, not been as scared. But I think with that getting started earlier, the next kind of thing that I would tell my younger self is once I did get started and I was fully into it, not only did I want to train all the time, I didn't want to take rest days. And I think for me, I would tell my younger self, those rest days are needed, they are necessary, and they push you forward. They allow your mind and your body to recover, or they give you a chance for your mind and your body to recover. They give you a chance to exhale, and they allow you to rebuild. And we can't go all the time. And I think that's just something that's super common. I almost viewed my rest days as like a weakness. Like I have to take today off or take today light. And it's not a weakness. It's helping you move forward, whatever level you're at.
It's one of those things where you can get away with it when you're that age too. So it's kind of hard to maybe learn that lesson, but that is when you recover, and you definitely do that quicker when you're younger, but you definitely need rest days also.
When we were younger, I remember you always just walking up to a barbell and throwing blues on and then just starting to snatch. You rarely needed a warm up. You just would get right into it. There was a couple times we were at a holiday party at one of our first gyms, a holiday party, like a Christmas party. And, we were just hanging out and all of a sudden you're back on the platform snatching 225 in your dress clothes or your jeans or whatever. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things too, just being on the move all day long. You're just kind of warm, but yeah, it'd be 135, 185, 225 and then start building in weight. But yeah, you could get away with that. I wouldn't really do that so much now. But when you're younger, it's not so hard to get away with it.
So I guess you need less days rest days when you're younger and less warm up.
And that honestly wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to think about. And I just remember people just looking at you and I'm like, oh, that's Pat. There he goes. I think that was special to you though. Like I need a little bit more warm up than that.
Something else that I think is a huge piece that tends to just come later for most people is nutrition. And it's, again, one of those things, especially when you're younger, you can get away with it. You can kind of eat whatever you want, especially if you're on the move all day, you're working out a lot. But the quicker or the sooner that you can understand how big of a role nutrition plays, you are just pouring gas on the progress that you can make. And, as you start getting in your 20s and 30s and beyond, nutrition is just going to play a bigger and bigger role. So not only are you going to make more progress, but just having an understanding of that to where you don't have to learn it later, it just plays such a dramatic role that I think that if you can get your head wrapped around that at a younger age, it can amplify the potential that you've got by leaps and bounds.
I'd love to hear, what were foods that young Patrick liked to eat?
The way we've eaten has evolved a lot. And like when we used to go out to eat, or when I would go out to eat as like a 20-year-old, like if I went to a restaurant, I'm getting a hamburger. Like that's just what I'm getting. And I was lean then for sure. But now, like over the past 10 years, we've cleaned our diet up so much that if I went out and ate like a normal hamburger from a restaurant, I would be tore up. So it's not even just the understanding of the calories, but the greasy, higher fat foods that you tend to get when you eat out just don't even settle anymore, just because we've gotten a little bit cleaner, a little bit more diligent about the foods that we're putting in our body, and it makes you feel good. And part of it, I think, is just not even knowing. It's like, this is just what I eat. I don't notice that it doesn't make me feel good, or I don't notice the impact that it has. But then when you do start cleaning those things up and you introduce them back in, it becomes very obvious.
Yeah, I definitely agree with nutrition, and I agree with everything you said. I would have a little bit of a different take on it if I was looking back. And for me, the take would be, and I think you can definitely attest to this, food is fuel, not punishment. And understanding that food is to fuel your performance, to give you energy into the gym, to help you sleep better, to help you recover so you can reap the rewards of all the hard work that you did in the gym. Food is to fuel you. And for me, I always felt like I ate on the lower side, just not having an understanding of what was in everything and thinking, I was kind of raised in that 2000s, and the less you eat, the smaller, the more lean you're going to be. It doesn't work like that. And that took me, I think that's where my passion for nutrition comes in, is if I would have just learned this sooner, I wouldn't have spun my wheels so much. I would have not experienced periods of so much fatigue and moodiness and poor sleep and just not feeling good and not understanding that I didn't feel good and that there was a very easy fix to that.
I think that's another really big difference between guys and girls in the teenage years, maybe, is that girls lean or tend towards just not eating as much, kind of minimizing the amount of food, and guys tend to kind of be in the opposite direction, where it's just like energy drinks, peanut butter jelly sandwiches, and like whatever is around.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. That's why I was asking like what young Patrick eats, because I very remember specifically like trying to live off like apples for breakfast at times, or like Cheerios, or like rationing Cheerios before I was swimming, and I was doing a lot of activity. And I remember when I met you, I would get out a pan to make one egg, and I would take like one egg with a few veggies, or I'd go on this big long run and then have a salad. And like I was eating regularly throughout the day. I just look at what I was eating, and it's like I didn't understand protein. I didn't understand carbohydrates and fats, and I didn't understand how to balance my plate. And it's not that I was eating bad. I thought I was doing, in my head, I thought it was great. And then you just start to understand like, wow, looking back, it's almost like I was punishing myself, not intentionally, but if I could have just understood what fueling and how to fuel, how much of a difference that would have made in my life.
I gave the hamburger example, and like that was definitely something that I would do. Like if we ate out, like I'm getting something good, hamburger and fries for sure. But I did have like I was generally aware of nutrition. It's just I wasn't really paying any sort of attention to calories on a regular basis. And like after a gym session, even pretty early on, I'd have like a sweet potato and a protein shake. So I was intentional about things like that. But as far as making sure that I was getting enough calories or the right amount of calories on a daily basis, like I had no clue with what calories I was eating or how many I needed. But I was just trying to make pretty good decisions for the most part.
Yeah, I remember something you used to have me do when I first started training, like actually hard. You were always on me about eating. You'd literally be like, you would make us sweet potatoes for our competitions when we would go away, and you'd cook them all in the oven. I'd never cooked a sweet potato in my life. My parents don't like sweet potatoes. I didn't cook sweet potatoes. I didn't eat sweet potatoes. You introduced me to so many foods, and that was one. And we would cook them, we would bake them like 425 degrees for 60, 80 minutes. And you wrap them in foil, and then you take them and then you cut them open. It's just like mush. It's basically like baby food. So it's so easy to digest and eat after you do a hard workout. Because I don't know, a lot of you guys listening, sometimes it can be really challenging to eat after a hard workout. But if you're doing workouts back to back, like we were when we were competing, like that was super important. The other thing I remember you doing is literally taking like half a cup of oats, not cooked, and just putting them in a shaker bottle, and then putting a scoop of protein in, and then sometimes like chocolate milk, water, milk, and then you just shake it, and the oats would get like soggy oats, and you drink it. And I remember thinking like, this guy is crazy.
I mean, I probably did that for years, honestly. Yeah, I mean, before in the morning, I would put some oats in a shake and let it sit there basically all day, and it would just kind of soak them up to where they get soft, and you've got some carbs and protein after a gym session in the evening.
You never thought twice.
No, I mean, it was much more of it wasn't about, I mean, I don't think it tasted bad, but it wasn't about like having a delicious meal. It was just like, I've got my carbs and I've got my protein, and it's very convenient.
Yeah, that's so funny to think about. And I mean, still great. Like honestly, that's a great post-workout. Great little pre-workout. So you were on it. I think another thing for me that I definitely have, I don't want to say struggled with, but just as I've matured, become a little bit smarter with, is understanding you'll have highs and lows. And I think that this could tie into motivation, I would say, but it's important to recognize you're not going to feel good every single day and every single week. In some weeks, you might feel like so motivated, you might feel so strong, the weights are going up easy, and you are just feeling good. And then you might have a couple weeks down the road. It might not be back to back. Maybe you're deep into a progressive overload in a cycle. Maybe you're just not feeling as strong. And that's at that point, it's not that there's anything wrong. It's just this can happen. And there's no reason to get down. It's just that's where the consistency that we talked about at the start of this comes back into play. You just keep showing up, and your body, you will work through it. And I think you can evaluate other things such as food or sleep, but to understand that nothing is linear when it comes to this fitness journey, and that you're going to experience highs and lows. And I think that is something that I would definitely remind myself of. So along those lines, like highs and lows, how about motivation? Like when you look back at yourself and you wanted to get started earlier, do you think you were always motivated? Or is it like more of the systems and the discipline that, or you start to feel good, so then you want to keep going? But even when that happens, I still think motivation can wane.
At least for me, it wasn't a motivation thing. It was just I was doing other things, and it wasn't on my radar. As soon as it was a decision that it was something I wanted to do, it was something I have stuck with since. And yeah, I mean, it was much more just like the people I was around were doing different things. You know, a lot of my friends weren't on like sports teams where that type of training was regular. So it just wasn't basically on my radar. So it wasn't really a motivation thing, because once I did start, I basically stuck with it ever since. And even through periods where I was working an incredible amount of hours, I would still make time to go at the end of the day, knowing that I might start my workout at 7 and I'm gonna have to be at work at 5:30 the next day. So it wasn't really a motivation thing, because I did enjoy it. It was just like, this is what I do. It wasn't like I have to talk myself into going. It's just like, no, when I get off work, I go to the gym, and I enjoyed it. It was part of my routine, and kind of like my protein oat shake. It's just kind of what I did.
It's funny. Yeah. I think that is a good point though, right there, is it's just what you did. And I think that a lot of people is like, that really does tie into the motivation and the discipline. You built systems and you built habits, and your system and your habit was you get off work and you go to the gym. I'm sure there were days that you were tired, and you were probably driving there feeling like you were dragging. There's no way every single day you got off work from working 5 a.m. to sometimes 6 or 7 p.m. that you were always energized and excited to go to the gym.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think recognizing that's the most important piece. It's not that you were like, oh, I'm checking out after my 12-hour day working on these cabins and I've been moving nonstop. But it's like you built these systems and these habits so that it didn't matter if you were motivated or not. It's what you did, and it's part of who you are. And I think that that's really important for people listening, is everybody's in different seasons and different chapters of their life. You know, we talk to people all day who just have their first kid. Some people have 3 kids. Some people, you know, they just started a new job and now they're trying to figure out their commuting schedule because they have to commute 45 minutes and trying to figure out when they're going to fit that workout in. And I think the most important piece is try different things, figure out what fits your schedule, but then make it part of what you do. And I think that that can go a long way.
Having something that holds you accountable. Maybe that's a workout buddy, somebody that's waiting on you, a program that you're following, and knowing that if I skip this week's workout, now I'm not just today's workout behind, I'm more or less a week behind, because instead of getting the progression that I was following for this week, now I'm basically going to be picking up in the same spot next week. So it's a snowball effect. And if you want to make progress, it's like, I've got to hit today so that next week I can hit the numbers I want to hit and then build on that for the following week and the following week. And I think fitness just in general is a big picture journey, and being able to zoom out and just kind of make the micro adjustments on a day-to-day basis that, like, I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that I get my workout in. And I may not see the results immediately, but the longer I'm able to keep this routine, the easier, one, it should get, and then 2, the more results you're going to get in the long run. With the things that with the type of training that you focused on, maybe earlier in your career, if you, looking back, would you still focus on those same things, or would you prioritize different styles of training, different movements, would you do things any differently looking back?
It's a great question. I think the one thing looking back is I would tell myself there is no perfect program. And you guys might be like, what the heck does that mean? There are good programs and there are not great programs, but like, you need a structured program. But if you don't enjoy it and you don't stick with it and you don't believe in it, you're probably not going to get all of the benefits you could be from getting from it. And I think that, especially with the realm that I was in, with the amount that we were training, the amount of things that I was doing, is I was always worried if I had the absolute perfect program. And that was a conversation you and I talked a lot about. And I'll let you kind of chime in there in a second if you want. But looking back at all the training that I did, I think I would have valued more lower intensity stuff sooner, especially in the CrossFit space, just because it didn't beat my body up as much and I could get such great aerobic benefits from it that would transfer. And then I think improving strict work. And I just wish we would have seen this sooner, which we implemented it, probably 5 or 6 years ago, which was super beneficial. But even earlier on, the style of hypertrophy and bodybuilding and the strict work that you can separate from these complex high skill gymnastics movements that can make those stronger, and kind of breaking down the movements and understanding what is my end goal here and what am I trying to improve or get stronger, and then kind of adjusting training around that. So there's kind of 2 things, the perfect program and then looking at the program.
I think sometimes it's the hunt for the perfect program that ends up giving people a lot more hangups and tends to really just set people back really far. And there's good programs and there's a lot of just random, not great programs. But I think that the mistake that people make is not sticking with anything long enough to make any progress. So if you're trying to go from step 1 to step 10, and you go to step 2, and then you switch programs and you're back to step 1, then you go to step 2, and then you switch programs, you're never making any progress. And then it gets frustrating that you're not making any progress, but it's because you haven't stuck with anything long enough in order to make progress. And I think part of that's just believing in what you're doing and being aligned with what your goals are. So I think sometimes you just kind of have to put some tunnel vision on and not worry about what other people are doing as well. I think maybe one of the negatives with social media is you can always see what other people are doing, and whether that's CrossFit or just, whatever it is, you can see people that you're maybe competing against and what they're doing for your training. And it's like, oh, I'm not doing that. Should I be doing that? And that's just a constant spiral that you're never going to solve. And you're just kind of chasing your tail at that point, that you can't just add in everything you see everybody else doing. It's like, if you got a structured progression and a program that you're following that's getting you closer to your goals, that is measurable, and you can track that you're making progress, you need to just kind of put your blinders on and just focus on what you are doing.
I love, yes, 100%. And I love that you brought up the social media thing. How many times, I'm sure those of you listening, you do the same thing, whether it's about the gym or life. How many times do we just see something and all of a sudden our world spirals because we're comparing to a 10-second highlight reel that we just saw somebody else post and we have no context? I did that every single year training for the games. It was insane. I would actually have to kind of stop and get off Instagram, and it's like, oh my gosh, they just did this and this in their training. And it's like, well, Christy, like, what are you doing in your training? Like, does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. You can train a million different ways for CrossFit. And we've talked about this in the past. Every games athlete I met was training so drastically different, but yet we were all getting to that level. And so you can't constantly compare yourself. You're setting yourself back. And then the other thing that you mentioned is you can't continuously jump programs and expect results. Like, you have to stick with something, and progressive overload works for a reason. And we love CrossFit because you'd see the variety, and people love that variety because it doesn't feel like you're doing the same thing every day. But I think that's something we do very well is we build the progressive overload into all of our programs, but in a creative way. And I think that, sometimes you'll go to these CrossFit gyms and somebody might front squat and then they might not front squat again or in any sort of way for 5 more weeks. And then maybe they'll back squat, and it's very random. Like, there needs to be some sort of, like you mentioned, structured program, but it can be creative, and it can kind of be to where, like, you don't necessarily show up and do a 5x5 every single day.
I think it's more common that gyms are doing squat cycles or deadlift cycles, but for some reason there's just a disconnect with all other exercises. So it's just normal. Hey, we're doing a squat progression. But if you're doing accessory work progressions or progressions with, bodybuilding movements, curls or tricep extensions or whatever it is, that's like frowned upon fairly often in, the typical CrossFit gym setting. But progressions are where you make progress. And if we can understand that we all know you're going to make progress if you can follow a squat cycle, why can't we apply that same thing to all the other exercises that we're doing? And I think with the Instagram thing as well, something that is it's great to be able to see and learn from other people that are doing creative or maybe new movements or exercises. Like, that's great to widen your experience of, what you can see and know and learn from. But I think one of the downsides is that in order to get attention, a lot of people are doing complex movements that it's okay, but there's no more benefit to just making it complex. And I think something that we do like put a priority on is keeping things simple but creative. So like we don't need the focus to be on learning a new complex movement. It can maybe be something new, but it should be something that you can do pretty simply. You don't need somebody to teach you how to do it, and it doesn't need to you're not going to spend a week trying to learn this movement. It's like, oh, I can see that and then I can repeat that. And I haven't done that before, but it's a great exercise. And we can kind of alternate through some of the basics and variations of the basics that are the ones that get the most results, that don't take a big learning curve and able to do them, especially and do them correctly.
Yeah, 100%. And I also love that, let's take working the tricep. We talk about this all of the time. We get a lot of emails of people wanting, if they're in the CrossFit space, wanting to improve their handstand push-up. So we program a ton of tricep work. That might be tricep extensions, banded tricep extensions. The beauty of that is we might have somebody else who's following it that wants to, hit a higher endurance now of those handstand push-ups, not just working on getting that first one, or somebody who wants to strict press heavier. It's like it all goes together. And so you can take somebody who's working on a different level of strict handstand push-ups to somebody trying to get their first one. Or we can have people following the program who just want to look good. And now they're getting the horseshoe on the back of their arm because they have this, for those of you guys who don't know, it's when you like flex your tricep and you get that little imprint on the back of your arm that just shows that defined tricep muscle. So it's really benefiting everyone and anyone that's doing it. And it's also bulletproofing the joints. Working the triceps is going to protect the elbow. And I think that that's just something that, like you said, it's like for some reason it just gets looked down upon and frowned upon, but there's just so many benefits across the board.
It is something that we did fairly early on, but I wish we would have been able to start even earlier. And it's just, you don't know what you don't know. But whether it's toes to bar or, pull-ups, whatever it is, it's like you can tear your hands up trying to do toe to bar all day long and make some progress. Or it's like, what muscle groups do I need to be able to strengthen? Or what skill do I need to improve to be able to do these? And how about I just focus on those where it's going to take less time, I'm not going to tear my hands up, and I'm going to be able to make more and measurable progress, strengthening my lats, working on my position, working on maybe my lower core, not hanging from the rig, where those things will make direct impacts. You can work progressions through them to get better at them, and it's measurable. And I think that it makes just so much more sense to train that way. And things like handstand push-ups, they're fun, they're a great skill if you're interested in being able to do them. But as far as just being a tricep exercise, like there's far better exercises if your goal is to grow your triceps. But then vice versa, if you do want to get better at handstand push-ups, like is it your chest that's the weak spot? Is it your shoulders? Is it your triceps? We can identify the weak link or your position, so you can work on the weak link, improve just the weak link, spend less time kind of ramming your neck into the ground, make actual improvement, and feel better along the way.
Yeah, handstand push-up was by far one of my least favorite movements, just because you're constantly ramming your neck into the ground. I'm only 5'2". I don't want to get any shorter. I don't want any more compression. I want to be lengthened out. But I do wish that is something that we would have implemented sooner. And it was really fun. You and I knew, like we saw that, we tried it, we practiced it, and we'd see the benefits of it, and we put it into our programming. And people would be like, oh, we haven't done handstand push-ups or whatever. And then all of a sudden we'd maybe have them in one day. And they're like, holy smokes, my handstand push-ups have gotten so good. Like, how is that possible? And it's like, because they already had the technique, they could do all the pressing now. And so, or I hit so many more push press, or I'm so much stronger overhead in my jerk. And it's like, all of this plays in. And sometimes it's just looking at it from a different frame of reference or a different lens. And I'm just grateful we have been able to apply that to our training, but also it's been so much fun to kind of watch that unfold for people.
It's also just drastically more efficient with time as well. So if you're working on your handstand push-ups and you've got the skill down, but you want to get stronger at them, you might spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get, a good amount of volume in. Or you could spend 10 to 12 minutes doing a superset of skull crushers and tricep kickbacks. You'll blow your triceps up. It's taken a fraction of the time. You're not going to beat up, and you can train again the next day.
Yeah, I think along with all of this training, I think another thing, and I think I'll be curious to see if you feel like there's a difference on male and female here too. But another thing I wish I would have learned sooner is that self-talk is so important. Self-talk is absolutely huge. Like, all too often we find ourselves talking to ourselves in a way that we would never encourage or talk to a friend. And sometimes it's like, you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace if you miss a lift, if you don't quite hit that PR that you were hoping for. Like, your world's not ending, but it just gives you a chance to have another opportunity. And I think for me, that I would just get in my head so much that almost set me back more than if I could have just kind of, yes, I was emotional about it, and it's okay to be emotional because I cared, but there's a lot of other ways that you can kind of work through that. And I think that would have got me further.
I think that's really kind of comes down to just being able to have a bigger picture view, to where it's like you're coming in, you're showing up, and you're just doing the work. And not every day is going to be perfect. Not every day you're going to make or feel or see the progress, whether that's getting leaner, getting stronger, whatever it is. But it's a much bigger view. And if you can just show up every day and do the work, you will hit the goals that you want. But missing a lift just is part of it. Not feeling like you're getting leaner is just part of it. But it's the showing up every single day and just working. And kind of having the blinders on is what I think can help be or create that success that we're looking for, without being so wrapped up in the moment of, am I doing the right thing? Did I miss? Am I not making progress?
Yeah, I think we have enough things to worry about in life. And that's also where social media comes into play, that, you are better because you still went to the gym. You are better because you showed up and you tried, and you are better for all of those things. And if you would have just thrown in the towel or not gone to the gym or whatever, you wouldn't be where you are today. And so I think that's a really great point, is it's just, we've got Milo under the table if you guys are watching and we're looking around. I think that's just a really great point, is that, again, it's not linear progress, but that self-talk can really play into that. And it can also make your experience more enjoyable. Like, there was plenty of times that I'd be in the gym and I'd have an off lift and it would affect my life outside of the gym. And so I think when I say self-talk is important, I also think it's just understanding that we can't let that just drive the rest of our life as well. Like, you're still better for going. And so I'd see this happen at the gym. People wouldn't get their muscle up that day, or they had bar muscle ups last week and they're having an off day and they wouldn't get them today, or they missed this lift that they should have hit this lift. And it's like, just just exhale. Like you said, broader picture, but don't take it out of the gym. Leave it in the gym. You'll come back, you'll get it the next day. And I think that's just something that I really wish I would have learned sooner. And I think it would have made some sessions just a little bit more enjoyable. And along that topic, I think that fitness should add to your life. It should not take away, and it shouldn't run your life. We are doing fitness for longevity, for health, for wellness, and it shouldn't be this anxiety-inducing thing. It should be something that makes you feel good, something that makes you feel confident, something that makes you feel strong. And I think that it should add to your life in all areas.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that it is never too late to start, but the earlier you start, the better. So something that just seems to be so common is people are going to start next week. They're going to start tomorrow. They're going to go to the gym, on Friday with their friend. I'm going to start cleaning up my diet, the next day. Start now. Don't wait. Don't push it off. There's no reason. There's no benefit. The sooner you do it, the better. And that is what will allow you to continue building and making and creating momentum.
It's kind of full circle because that's what we talked about at the start of this podcast. That really is, I think, the number one thing. And no matter when you're starting or what you're starting, it can be scary. I went to a yoga studio for like the first time in over 12 or 13 years just recently, just, to unwind and I stretch at home. I do recovery at home, but to do it in a different way, just to step outside of my comfort zone. And it was really enjoyable. And I think that a lot of times people get caught up in, well, where do I start? How do I start? Well, we have an IBEX training app. We'd love to help you, but whatever it is, like what do you enjoy doing? And I think coming back to the drawing board is if you enjoy it, you will do it. I'm not saying that I enjoyed yoga. I'm just saying that I stepped outside of my comfort zone and I'm glad that I did. Pretty rigid. I don't really look like a yogi when I walk in there. As a lot of people ask me if I lift weights, and that's cool because I do lift weights, and it's great that something shows for that. But it's just getting started. I want to get better at recovery and want more flexibility. I need to take action to do that.
I think something that's also important to acknowledge is that whether it is your goals, your age, fitness also has chapters, and that is also okay. We've gone through a lot of those chapters ourselves, going from you being a competitive swimmer, runner, CrossFit Games, back to running. And, things definitely have evolved. Goals have evolved. Training has evolved. So what would your perspective be on kind of the stages or maybe seasons of training?
I think it can be hard at times to recognize that maybe something isn't serving you anymore, or that it's time to move on, and that could better serve you in different ways. And I think that sometimes we just have to ask ourselves, are you still enjoying this? Am I still getting benefits of this? Or for example, us starting to incorporate the bodybuilding, like that was frowned upon, and just understanding like, are there different ways that I could be trying to achieve my goal, and not be afraid to step outside of the box. Because I think all too often we can be so afraid of what somebody else thinks of us. And I remember doing bicep curls in the gym and feeling like I was like a sellout for some reason, but then my pull-ups got so much stronger and my ring muscle ups got better. And it's like, this is interesting. So how just kind of putting your blinders on, which we talked about, but understanding that there are chapters and things will change. And for some of us, that may be as we age, we can handle less volume or less high intensity work. And so it's like, maybe you've been doing all these HIIT classes and it's just not serving you anymore. You're just tired. You're feeling burnt out. You're feeling like, I just can't do another HIIT workout. There's so many other types of fitness that you could be doing. You could be weightlifting, and you can still reach whatever goals, if that's to look good, to feel good, to perform. And so I think it's just understanding that you don't only have to do one thing, but there's lots of different paths that can lead you to a long-term relationship with fitness and longevity that's going to help you stay strong, keep your bones strong, maintain your muscle mass as you age, and just help you feel good all around.
And I think that cuts both ways. I think for some people, it's like if you've been focused on being super lean and building an aesthetic frame for a long time, it's like now maybe you are just bored with that, or it's been demanding on your body for a long time and you want to run a marathon. Like you can make that transition. You don't have to just stick with the thing that you've been doing. And that cuts the other way as well, where if maybe you were so focused on performance for years and years and years, and maybe the more aesthetic side wasn't as much of a priority, you can still make that a priority. You can change up your training, you can change up your diet, and you can make progress in a different direction that I think can sometimes be really stimulating and motivating to just mix things up.
Yeah, or maybe you came from outdoors and extreme sports like you, and then you found the gym and you realize like, dang, like what if I would have found this earlier?
I still like all that stuff, the extreme sports and the getting outside, but now it's just kind of being able to blend the two and using the fitness to better experience those things.
So after all this is said and done, what is your top thing? Just start sooner. That's if for anybody listening, if they take anything away from this, for you, Patrick, like what would be your top thing to share?
Personally, mine would be nutrition. And I think that just has had the biggest impact on me. And even over the past 6 months, I'm a full grown adult now, and I just started counting my macros, and it has made a shocking difference. I eat the exact same foods. I've eaten healthy, I've eaten clean, but dialing those in has made a drastic difference.